Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your technical critic, and while I was going over some videos on my channel, I suddenly realized you completely forgot to make that discussion video for Game of Thrones. So I immediately grabbed my camera, came here, looked over. Thank you to all two of you for leaving your comment. Sophia, you are, if you don't know who Sophia Al-Arkan, subscribe to her channel. She leaves some of the best comments I've ever seen, and my dear, thank you. Thank you so much for being you. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you're watching this or not, but if you do watch this, PM me. I feel like you deserve a reward, so PM me. We'll work something out, whether it's a t-shirt or just send me your address, and we'll figure out the details later. So what's going to happen is I'm going to look into the comments, I'm going to do the nice discussion, I'm going to read the comments, do the discussion, I'm going to do just a general roundup of my thoughts on Season 4, and that'll be the end of it. As always, like, favorite, subscribe. I'd say leave a comment, but it's not... Yes, leave a comment, but I don't think it's going to make it into another video, because between Korra and Orange is the New Black and Roger Ebert's new film and just everything that's going on, I don't think, and the fact that Game of Thrones is gone for another year, I don't think I'm going to be answering that many discussion questions. At least not for Game of Thrones. I will be answering for Legend of Korra and for whatever else I do, as always. But maybe I should have a weekly. I just answer all the I just make an answer to all the comments that I get. But that might become a thing. But here we go. We're doing this. So first one comes from Sophia Al-Arkan. My dear, thank you very much. It is 4 paragraphs long. And right at the bottom it says, sorry for the long response. My dear, I am a critic with a mask on my face. You do not apologize to me. Never do you apologize to me. So, I'm going to read this. I'm going to read the whole thing. And then we're going to discuss this in parts. So, here we go. Seriously. Did we watch the same episode? My dear, I know exactly how you feel, but you have to understand, I came off of episode 8. If you compare episode 10 to episode 8, they just don't hold this, they don't have the same gravitas. Episode 8, we had heavy advancement of the storyline. Episode 10, it was more housekeeping, and while housekeeping is nice, it's not exactly entertaining, but I'm going to get into that after I finish. I found it to be quite exhilarating, like a new chapter is being opened for the next season. A new beginning. Not to mention it was easily the most gorgeously shot out of all the episodes. And I am so not going to complain about finally seeing Bran and Stannis' storylines finally going somewhere. I mean, I knew it was coming, having read the books. Oh, so you're a book reader. But those two have easily been some of the most underdeveloped plots in the show, which has padded out Stannis' plot and has glossed over or outright cut a lot of the mysticism and fantastical intrigue surrounding Bran's. And I know non-book reader fans are really getting bored with them. My dear, I agree with everything you've said so far. I think the whole point of Bran's storyline is that it is going to play a much larger role in the grand scheme of things. The books are not finished yet, so I don't also know what is ultimately in store for him. And it was nice to finally see the Children of the Forest on screen, but to each their own, I guess. I have a rather long tangent to go on about that. Now, about the whole wall thing. There's definitely a lot in the source material to work with, even if they have to tweak things here and there to make it more palatable as a show. They have done this with the King's Landing plot before. Stuff does happen in the whole Night's Watch storyline in the books, and it does have its own mystical intrigue in the books, which is given as much weight as the King's Landing stuff, if not more. I really don't wish to come off as just a purist avid fan. I'm going to stop you right there. Thank you for being a purist avid fan, because if you were not a purist avid fan, you would not care this much to make a comment. Purist avid fans are the best because we're the ones, and I include myself for other things of course, never apologize for your fandom. As a matter of fact, wear your fandom proudly and invite other people to rejoice in that fandom. because we're the ones who know all of the small details here, there, and everywhere, that while they may not make any sense in the main storyline at the time, in the grand scheme of things, they are the clues that lead us to be able to predict this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and let us discuss things on a much higher level. So, do not apologize for being an avid fan. Now, where was I? But the problem is, not with the source material, it's with the adaptation. I do not require that everything be exactly like the books, because then I might as well stop watching the show, as it does often deviate from the source material. But they simply do not have done a good job developing. Sorry, that was me. But they simply have not done a good job developing that plot. However, I am a lot more optimistic after this season finale, which I loved. One of the biggest issues is the fact that they split the third book in season 3 and 4. This worked fine for the King Landing plotline, but not for some of the others such as The Wall. So in the book, there isn't that much of a time lapse between Jon leaving Ygritte and the wildlings and the Battle of the Wall. So the reader never forgets that Jon still has feelings for her. It does not bother me that the show decided to go this route, but I do agree that they could have done a much better job conveying that Jon still had feelings for her. Oh, I think they did quite a good job conveying Jon still had feelings for her. Or that he even had feelings for her in the first place, because you are right about their romance being rushed in season 3. Thank you, I am right. Sorry for the long response. As always, as I said, you do not apologize to me, especially not for your avid fandom. So let's break this down. We did watch the same episode, but I might have watched it in a different context to you. You're watching it as a book reader, which is fine, but I'm watching it as a critic. And the problem is this: when you take this episode and you compare it to everything else that happened this season, it is a standard episode. It has a bunch of stuff that happens in the beginning, and then the ending, which is what you're really there to see. Where else did they do this? Episode 2, Joffrey's death. Episode 4, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember that's what they did. Oh, right, the burning of Craster's Keep. They've done this throughout the entire episode, with probably the exception of episode 8, which is by far the best episode of this entire season. Why is this? It's because of how it's structured. These episodes have essentially been padding out their storylines until the big event that happens at the very end. In the final episode, it's padding. The big event is Tyrion's escape. In the Purple Wedding, it's padding. They're pushing the story forward, but they're not doing it in a way that is particularly entertaining. They're just doing it in a way that keeps you watching so that you can finally get to the end. Episode 8, on the other hand, let's take an analysis of what happened. If you have Arya's storyline, you have this big buildup that they're going to get to the Eyrie, and that in your mind, looking at everything that's happened, you're like, yes, she's going to meet up with Sansa, and everything's going to be fine. What happens? She died 3 days ago. Arya, psychotic laughter. So build up, punch and betrayal. Daenerys' storyline. You've got the love story just Grey Worm telling the servant girl that he loves her just by telling his life story. That is a wonderful and poignant scene. It builds you up. It builds the watcher up. So you've got build up, and then you've got Sir Jorah's betrayal. Right? Sansa, you get a double betrayal, because you get, in the preview for this episode, which everybody watched, you get, I have to tell the truth. You're thinking, oh my god, she's going to out Littlefinger. So build up, and then she stays on Littlefinger's side. That's a double betrayal. And what is the aftermath of that? You're the evil I know, and I know what you want, so looks like we're doing this. And your brain is basically going, I'm not sure what just happened there, but I don't think I like it. So again, you have a lot of heavy progression. Even with Tyrion, you get this build-up that, Oberyn is not only going to fight the Mountain, he's going to win against the Mountain, he's going to avenge his sister's rape and murder, he's going to avenge the murder of his niece and nephew, and he might actually get some stuff to go after the Lannisters with. He is going to get the justice that is denied to everybody in King's Landing. And that is what the build-up is. Build up, build up, build up. Awesome spear scene. Who gave you the order? And at that moment, bam! Betrayal. Let's look at episode 10. What do we have? Immediately coming off of the John Wall storyline, which I have to say, episode 9, visually spectacular. It's a Michael Bay episode. I'm sorry to compare it to Transformers, but you've got a lot of epic scenes, you've got lots of big badass fighting, but story-wise, what actually happened? The attack on the wall happened. Great. That is one incident in a sea of stuff happening. In a cast of thousands, we saw one thing happen. Which, while it's nice to put a nice little bow of Eager got killed by somebody who was not Jon Snow, and we're going to set up Sam's love storyline with Gilly, maybe, it's just not satisfying. And the same thing kind of happened here. We're just housekeeping with everybody's episodes. You're seeing the logical conclusion of everything that's happened in the other 9 episodes. So, what do we see? Daenerys' dragons are running wild. What's the logical conclusion? At some point, they're going to hurt somebody, and the black dragon hurt someone. What's the logical conclusion after that? Daenerys has to chain her dragons up. And now she loses her power base, and now things are supposed to start spiraling downhill. Right? She's lost her main advisor, and she's lost 3 of her dragons, because they don't know where the black dragon is, and apparently it's out of her control. Right? So things are being set up for them to spiral down in season 5. But that's just the implication. We don't know for sure that that's what's going to happen. She could still pull out okay and still be the boring, and still have the boring storyline that that has the really interesting character, but people are sick of because nothing ever happens. Arya's storyline. It's nice it was visually spectacular to see Brienne fight the Hound. And I agree with you. The most gorgeously shot out of all these episodes. I agree with you. That was a gorgeous fight scene. It was beautiful. But after coming off the Wall episode, was it absolutely necessary for the Hound to die in this particular way, in this particularly epic way? Yes. For Arya to go to Braavos? Arya has had, and this is a plot line, may I point out, that has been so heavily implied for a season and a half. Ever since she got the coin, Valar Morghulis, right? If at the start of season 4, after showing the coin to those 4 guys and getting the Hound to kill the 4 of them, if at the start of season 4 we had Arya on the ship to Braavos, and through flashbacks we see her story with the Hound, that would have been, story-wise, that would have been more, that just would have been a better way to do it, because she's still traveling to the place she's supposed to go to. If you take a look at Arya and Hound storyline, yes, they had their arc where they get to know each other, right? But look at the ending of that arc. Arya stares at him coldly, she takes his silver, and she walks off. Which is essentially the essence of their relationship. They protected each other in a way. She was his hopefully lottery ticket. He was the one who was going to keep her from being raped and murdered on the road to wherever it is she needed to go. That was it. As soon as he couldn't fulfill his end of the bargain, and she couldn't fulfill her end of the bargain, it's only logical that they would separate away from each other. Now, if this had been told by a flashback while she's traveling to Braavos, she'd still be moving somewhere, and we'd still be getting filled in on her story. Nobody loses in that scenario. So, and it's been heavily built up that at some point she's going to end up in Braavos so that she can be trained by these assassins. So I really do not see, in the end, what the whole point of Arya's and the Hound's storyline was, if not just to add filler, so that what do we lose if we take away her storyline? We lose the Hound killing some people over some chickens. We lose him stealing some silver from a woman from a girl and a man who make excellent rabbit stew. We don't get to see him bitten and teach Arya how to find the heart, which really I don't. The flashback would. Her storyline really should be told all through flashback. You could tell her story backwards. It would not make a difference. Because we don't know where that story is going. We know it has something to generally do with Bravos, but we don't know where it's going. So that's really, I'm not sure where that rant came from or went to, but the whole idea of new beginnings, it's not showing us anything surprising. It's just housekeeping. The biggest surprise of this was Tyrion killing his dad and Stannis popping up in the middle of the wall. That was a massive surprise, which was instantaneously glossed over, if you might. It was instantaneously glossed over for the death of Ygritte. So we now have to burn Ygritte and show that Jon is still really, really desperately in love with this girl, and he will probably never love again. Redheads will do that to you. Oh well. But yeah, setting up Stannis' storyline the way that they did, you're right. It is nice to see Stannis finally getting some exercise as a storyline. However, let's look at it this way. If you were to take Stannis and let's just follow, this is all logical conclusion stuff, right? Stannis popping up north of the wall was completely out of left field. Of all the people who are going to go north of the wall, of all the people who are sent messages that we need help north of the wall, the fact that he showed up is probably the most unexpected and the most random. So, he shows up north of the wall. What's the next logical step after this? He now has to go south, and in order for him to go south past the wall, he has to go through Winterfell. That means that he and the Boltons are going to meet up and they're going to be butting heads. Unless they go and they decide to axe him off. Which, in terms of Game of Thrones, the way that they just axe off well-established characters, it's something that they do all the time. But I feel that unless you're going to introduce an even more villainous person than Ramsay Bolton, which at this point would be very hard because we've seen him torture the Greyjoys to no end. Unless they're going to go through that quickly, like, he's dead, that happened, let's keep going on to King's Landing. Really, that's the only logical solution to what's going to happen next with Stannis' story. Will Jon Snow be involved? Probably for one episode before he marches south. Maybe he plans to take Jon and reinstall him back in Winterfell because he is the last Stark that they know of. Even though he might not be a Stark by name, he is a Stark by blood, and the Starks being one of the most... That's another thing. Here's something I don't get. The Starks are supposed to be this ancient family of the North, and they have some importance to the North. But that has been completely and utterly removed from this story, as you mentioned, Sophia. And quite frankly, it was briefly mentioned in Season 3, maybe? Yeah, Season 3. It was briefly mentioned in Season 3. It had something to do with them and the wildlings, and how the two of them separated in some way, shape, or form. But to be quite honest, we don't know where that's going because we don't know where the books are going. And this is a separate rant. I'm going to move on to that later, but first, just let me finish Stannis' story. My point with Stannis. My point is this. If you were to take Stannis' plot, Stannis' introductory plot here at the very end of Season 4, you were to move it to Season 5, Episode 1. What do you lose? You could have cut the entire wall plot from Episode 10, and you would have lost, what? 15 minutes maybe of padding. 10 at the very least, right? You'd have lost 10 minutes of padding. Because what did they really do? They had John go out, meet with, what is his name? Meet with the leader of the wildlings. And what did they do? They drank and they talk about people who died in the battle that we just saw. We saw them talk about a giant whose lineage goes back, whose lineage goes back way before the first men, who is the last of his line, who was killed in the tunnel by a farm boy. Great. What does that actually serve except to just pad out this, just to pad out this episode? I feel like we could have had maybe a half-hour episode, possibly. Actually, I think this episode was longer than the standard one. I think this might have been like maybe an hour and 15 minutes. So if you would remove John's storyline, this would have been a regular episode. And same thing with Bran's storyline. If you'd removed him and stuck him in, you could have made season 5 all about Stannis and Bran, right? Because there's a heavy mysticism thing implied in season 3 that doesn't come into play until Anthony Hopkins appears as the Three-Eyed Raven. I mean, if you had removed his cameos from this season, what would you and just started at the Three-Eyed Raven, you could have had a much better season with Bran's story. You could have done a lot more. I mean, let's look at it. What happened at the start of the season? Bran touches a tree. Bran gets captured and the girl gets nearly raped until she's saved when Jon Snow attacks. And then they're absent again for another 6 episodes until the epileptic kid dies at halfway through this one. I mean, if you had removed all that and just simply started where we ended and moved forward from there, we could have gotten a lot more mysticism, a lot more fantasy put into this supposed fantasy series. You've heard me rant on this before. This is not a fantasy series. This is a political thriller set in a possibly fantasy world. We've seen fantastical things happen, but they don't seem to affect the main storyline. I know. In the book, they affect the main storyline. But this is not the book we're talking about. This is the TV show. And as I was about to say with the book, you're correct. They've split which was it that you said? The third book? Hang on. They split the third book into season 3 and season 4. But there's a problem. And here's the problem coming up with season 5. Assuming that they do a book a season, or a book every 2 seasons, supposing they split up the 4th book into 1 and 2. George R.R. Martin has not finished writing the 5th book. So he has no idea where the story is going to go. And there is no one on the planet who knows where the story is ultimately going to end up, because even George R.R. Martin doesn't know how many books are going to be in this series. It's like when J.R.R. Tolkien sat down to write the Silmarillion. He had no idea how much mythology he was actually going to... Well, I shouldn't say that. He had a general idea how much mythology, how much story he was going to put in. Martin seems to have no idea exactly how he's going to finish the story. He just knows that he's proceeding on and seeing what these characters are going to do and how do they advance the storyline. And you're correct. They've changed quite a bit. Here's the problem. When they reach the end of the material they have, the end of the 4th book, or whatever is, I don't know the whole situation. I'm pretty sure there's 4 books. When they reach the end of the 4th book, they either have to do 2 things. One, and here's the thing, the earliest projection for Martin finishing his book is sometime after 2020, maybe 2018 at the earliest. That's 4 years from now. Think about that. 4 years, 2018. Where you're going to have a completely new president halfway through their term. And apparently the world water wars will have started, if not be starting, be close to starting by then. Think about that. 4 years, an entire university degree from now. So what that means is that if they want to continue to do the Game of Thrones show, their writers are going to have to take a serious detour and basically start writing the series for themselves and writing what's going to happen for themselves while Martin writes his own thing separately, secretly, inside of his own house. And when he does come out, guess what? You're going to have severe... If you think that right now there are severe deviations in plot, you have no idea what's coming, because there are going to be severe deviations from plot. That's if they choose to do that. Either that, or by the time they run out, they're going to go and do the short stories. Like Martin apparently has his own Silmarillion with like history that goes way back, and that'll be fun, memorizing a whole nother cast of thousands. So really, the problem with the books is that they're not finished. What you're actually seeing happening with the books is what would have happened if J.R.R. Tolkien had written his books, his series of books, in the modern day. And it's not Martin's fault. It's just the way that media is consumed. In days of yore, the idea of taking a book series before it was finished and turning it into a set of movies would have been ludicrous. And the fact that the Lord of the Rings was not attempted until the early 2000s, simply because of the complexity of the books, is a testament to that. If they'd been written in modern day, however, you'd have gotten another Game of Thrones scenario. The fact of the matter is, the story's not finished, and they're trying to make another story out of it. It's bordering on ludicrous, to be quite frank, that what they've done to Game of Thrones. But what that means is also this: by the time, if they had waited for George R.R. Martin to finish, by the time Game of Thrones became a TV show, people would have stopped caring. So it really is a no-win situation on either side. So all I can predict from this is that we're going to have a significant deviation. We're either going to watch the show crash and burn because they run out of material, or crash and burn because they take a deviation storyline, or succeed but take a severe deviation in the storyline of Game of Thrones. And what you're going to end up with is a split timeline by the end of book 4. Now, as to the wall thing, as I said, the wall was Michael Bay-esque. It hasn't been, here's the thing, it hasn't been covered in any significant amount that the reader would find interesting. Yes, mysticism and everything is nice, but let's look at the audience. The audience is, for all intents and purposes, just regular people. They're not the avid geekdom fans such as yourself or me, right? They don't belong to our group. Sure, being nerdy is the current in trend, but simply being with the fashion does not make you a part of our world. You have to. We are a different species of human. We obsess about details that you would not believe the details that geeks and nerds obsess about. Okay? There's a reason why we have our own separate culture from what is considered the mainstream. And I'm fine that we're not being hunted for our skin anymore. But there's a problem with taking what's ours and trying to make it mainstream. You inherently change it. And that's essentially what's happened with the Game of Thrones universe. You have what is considered the last high fantasy series since Tolkien being taken and turned mainstream. And what does this mean? It means taking it and turning it into something that most people will understand. Most people are not going to understand the religious overtones of the Red Lady, or the fantasy implications of Bran and of the Song and Fire of Ice, Bran's storyline and Daenerys' storyline, which will eventually intersect somewhere up here. And we're about right here in that particular story. We don't know where it's going, but we know that there's a story to get there. Instead, what they've done is they've House of Cards it. They've taken what most people will understand, the politics of the Game of Thrones universe, and turned it into something people like to watch. Why do people watch this show? They watch it because Ned Stark got his head cut off trying to be Hand of the King. It's basically House of Cards set in the medieval era. It's all the political intrigue that has attracted all these people to this show. We are in the minority still. Don't be fooled by all these nerd pretenders. We the true geeks and nerds, we are still in the minority. We will always be in the minority. There are not enough of us to make Game of Thrones a popular show to watch. So, as you said, they've cut so much of the mystical intrigue from the Wall and the Bran storyline simply because they need it to be palpable for regular people. And on top of that, this is a visual medium. The mysticism, and mind you, I haven't read the books, but mysticism and magic always goes over the top. I mean, let's look at what happened just in this last episode with the Children of the Forest. So far, the fantasy we've seen has been extremely restrained. If you think that women birthing demon babies that then go and assassinate people's brothers, and dragons going and burning slave masters is superb fantasy, trust me, you have no idea some of the stuff that is written in our books. There are mystical stones that bring people back from the dead, knives that can steal souls, things that staffs that have their mystical staffs that have their own personalities and in their spare time fight dragons. You haven't got a clue some of the things we have lurking in our stories. If you think this is high fantasy, this is restrained. When everyone saw the Child of the Forest take fire in its hand and shoot the skeletons coming out of the ice, people said, wow, that was over the top. Even I said, you know what, compared to everything that's happened in this show, that was over the top. If they showed any of the true mysticism, any of the true magic, any of the true anything that probably happens in this book with the comet or the fire or just whatever they have, people would lose their minds. They would go, wow, that is too much, I'm not watching. So really, in order to make it watchable, they've had to adapt it in this way, and I feel for you. I really do. I feel for you in the way that they've taken The Hobbit and they've turned it into a media circuit. Well, not a media. Just a... The way The Hobbit and The Silmarillion have been paired, it's good, but it could be done so much better if you understand where I'm coming from. And it's the same thing with this. And I see where you're coming from. It's good, but it could be done a lot better. So that is, let's see, did I get everything? Oh yes, Jon and Ygritte's storyline. Now here's the thing, we were actually given a timeline in this season. Now, how long do you think that this season in terms of time has gone? A year? 6 months? Under 3 weeks. Everything that's happened has happened within 20 days. And here's how I know that. What was the timeline for everyone getting married? Well, it was going to be Joffrey gets married and then Cersei gets married 2 weeks after that. Well, what happened? Joffrey's dead. What did the Lannisters lay up? 2 weeks after the death, Joffrey's little brother is going to get married to Marjorie. 2 weeks after that, Cersei's going to get married to the gay knight. The Knight of Flowers? Whatever. Anyways, so, between Joffrey's death, episode 2, and episode 10, Sir Pounce has not been the best man at the wedding yet. Marjorie is still only half a queen. So this has not even been 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, I'd actually say, you know what, maybe, let's see, it was supposed to be the trial, the marriage, and then the second marriage, right? So the trial has happened. I'd say that in the entirety of this story, maybe a week has passed. between episode 1 and episode 2, they said weeks had passed, so I'm going to say 2 weeks. This whole season has basically been 3 weeks in the life of Westeros. So, but between Ygritte leaving, between Jon and Ygritte splitting up, as they did at the end of season 3, and Ygritte dying in season 9, I would say 15 days have passed, at most 2 weeks. 3 at the most. 3 at the most. So, in terms of time, it seems like a while has passed, mostly because the betrayal of Jon happened at the end of season 3, and then a year happened, and then just this whole season happened while they ignored that storyline. So it does seem like a long time. The reader and the watcher, as you correctly state, will forget. But I do feel that they did a good job of conveying how much Jon did love Ygritte, simply by the fact that he became so uncomfortable talking about it with Sam. Just in that one scene at the beginning of episode 9. His discomfort in talking about Ygritte is so apparent, it's extremely subtle, is what I would say. It's a very subtle portrayal of how they love each other. And if you look at that whole scene with him burning her body, the way he sets her up, it's beautifully done. You see him taking very good care of the food. He doesn't just hork a bunch of wood together, toss her body on, and psh, it's not like the mass burning that they did inside of Castle Black. It's loving. It truly is loving, and as much of a waste of time as it seems, it does convey the love that they feel for each other. The problem is that these set pieces, while they're grand, are not entertaining, and as such, it only makes the episodes seem okay. The more powerful stuff is lost because the audience is expecting something completely different. We're expecting an epic end to what has been probably one of the most violent and graphic seasons of the entire series. So to have just a standard season where standard stuff happens that pushes the plot forward and does nice little bits of housekeeping, that's great for the 40 minutes before Joffrey dies in episode 2. It's great for episodes 3 and 4, but it literally has almost no place in the finale of something that has been so grandiose. So, you're sorry for the long response. I'm even sorrier for the very long discussion response. I think I've gone on about 40 minutes now, so I'm going to move on to the second comment. Believe it or not, I haven't looked at it. I've been so focused on I haven't even looked at the second comment. So, thank you, Sophia. Thank you for such a wonderful comment, something that I could really sink my teeth into. And now we're moving on. If you're still here watching this, you are a boss. I mean, you are just... Oh, wow. Let's see. What does it say? The next one is from Juan! You came back! For those of you who don't know, Juan Rodriguez. He commented on my Korra videos 6 months ago. And I love him. I love his comments. He's always very intriguing with what he has to say. So let's see what he says. Juan Rodriguez, June 26th. Okay, so this is a little bit closer. Oh, he did 3. He did Watchers on the Wall, he did Mountain and the Viper, and The Children. So let's see. Let's start. I like the season finale and can't wait for season 5. Now, the reason this season feels drag is because HBO producers want to make more money. But the real reason, I believe, is because George R.R. Martin has not yet finished his last 2 books to complete the series. Imagine if the writers run out of material. WTF are they going to do if the old man has not yet finished the books? Ah, my dearest friend and oldest commenter, You have hit the nail on the head. As I said several hours ago, you're right, they are stretching this story as far as they can, simply because they do not want to run out of material. And I guarantee you this, they're going to go as in-depth with Stannis and the Watchers on the Wall plot as they did in this season. Why? Because they want to make up a whole bunch of stuff about the imp and the spider, and maybe some stuff with Daenerys and Arya and Sansa, right? They're going to stretch out those storylines that they know people want to see, right? You have to understand, they're making the show that the people want to see, not the show that's faithful to the story, but the show that people want to see. And they want to see Peter Dinklage. This season was the season of Peter Dinklage. Next year it will be the season of Peter Dinklage. This show is really about Peter Dinklage. Everybody else is just side stories to him, right? Despite the fact that you get to pick and choose your own adventure with whoever you care about and then forget whoever else is here, it really is the people, as you're correct, the producers of HBO are basically trying to promote whoever they can in order to make as much money as they can. You're absolutely right. And if he does not finish the books, or more importantly, if the books do not go in a direction that the producers want them to go, then WTF are they going to do? You are absolutely right, and I fear for the series, just the way you do. Now, what did he say about Watchers on the Wall? This episode was so badass plus Jon and Sam Rock. Well, that may be, but the story didn't go anywhere. You have to admit that point. Nothing happened besides a gigantic scythe coming down from the wall and it being badass. Nothing happened. And as I said before, if you take Stannis' storyline that is in addition to that wall and move it to the first one, to the first episode of season 5, you miss nothing. You literally could skip this episode and nothing would change. Now, Mountain and the Viper. The finale of this episode was so shocking. F up. You are quite correct. I don't know why none of us saw that, actually. You know what? Think about it. Everything that we've expected in terms of Game of Thrones has always been turned on its head. The death of Joffrey. This is something that people have been chomping at the bit for ages. And when Joffrey finally dies, people are like, oh, well, he died like a child. Just HBO as Game of Thrones, and I say this as I've always said it, Game of Thrones gives you what you want, but always in a way that makes you hate yourself for wanting it. I mean, just look at Theon Greyjoy. This is a man who not only betrayed Robb Stark and attacked Winterfell, but on top of that, he killed 2 children. And in response to that, they had him horrifically tortured. So much so that people are literally going away from the show saying, stop it, I can't watch this anymore. It is too much. Let's remember, what did he do? Just besides betraying Robb Stark, he killed 2 children. How did he kill them? He burned them to death. He burned 2 children to death. In any regular society, that would get you executed. That would get you at life in prison. Would be too little. People would demand that that person be removed permanently from society. Lethal injection, head cut off, whatever. Just get rid of him. And people were like, and these are literal responses people had. People were like, I want that guy worse than dead. I want to see him tortured, slow torture. And guess what? That's exactly what we got. But they did it in such a long, drawn-out way that people literally did a 180. And they're like, stop it. Stop torturing Theon Grey. People are on his side now. Everyone is on his side now. Except for a few people who hold out. Sansa. Let's look at Sansa. I don't think there's anyone who didn't want to see Sansa escape from King's Landing. Well, guess what? She escaped from King's Landing and out of the fire into the Eyrie with, and I really do mean Eyrie. That's a double entendre there, because Littlefinger is just so creepy. he is so old and she is so, and now she's playing the Game of Thrones with him, which means at some point I'm gonna have to watch them. Ugh, it's just yuck. It's so, he's so old, she's so young, and it's even more perverse when you think that apparently she looks exactly like her mother at that age. So it's just a layer cake of yuck. Ugh, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies thinking about it. And at any rate, that again, there's another example of them turning something you want completely on its head. You want to see something happen at the wall? Sure, we'll give you something happening at the wall, a gigantic action scene. But guess what? It's going to advance the story in no way, shape, or form. It's going to be completely unsatisfying at the very end of it. They always do this. They give you what you want, but in a way that makes you hate it. It just makes you hate it. Are there any more? I don't think that. Yeah, there are no more. Yeah, there are no more. There are no more. I don't know the word for this. There are no more comments for Game of Thrones. So that finishes up the Game of Thrones discussion. I'm now going to go into the general review. There's some Korra comment, but that's going to come in my next Korra video next week. Unless, of course, I could find a proper Spanish version with the subtitles. Unfortunately, I decided to take a break in between Korra videos, and they took it down before I could watch it entirely. So now I got to go hunt. And short of actually downloading the video and making my own subtitle version, which I'm not going to do, looks like I'm going to have to wait till next week with everybody else. So take that as you will. As it is, though, now it's time for just a general discussion of this. If you made it this, if you're still here after this 2-hour rant, a round of applause for you. You are the best. You are truly the best fans. Anyways, so the general discussion for Game of Thrones. This season, season 4, has been the most gory, graphic, and creepy season that has ever happened. And I'm continuing to compare this to things like season 3 and with the death of Ned Stark. Let's look at how season 1 started off. It started off with people getting ripped to shreds and a guy's head getting cut off with blood spurting from it. But this one, oh man, it just tops everything. Because between Sansa and Littlefinger, which is just, I don't care that she's being played by a 27-year-old actress. It is just creepy as hell that he has such a sexual fascination with her. Just no. So between that happening, the death of Joffrey, Ramsay Snow hunting down some random girl with dogs and arrows. I mean, think about that. That scene was completely forgotten in comparison to everything else that has happened in this season. In comparison to everything else, that is a forgotten scene. That Ramsay was hunting down a girl with some other chick, whoever she was. Why? Because apparently the chick thought that the girl looked prettier than she was. What's his response? To get rid of her in the worst way possible. And what's that? That's our introduction to the brand new Theon Greyjoy. You've got, and then after that, let's see. You've got rape in Joffrey's tomb, which for some reason seems mildly appropriate. Just everything that, just everything that happened in this season was so gory, just so out there. It's just, this season, and the story has moved on. Some of the stories have moved on in a great way. Like King's Landing is still King's Landing. I mean, they're still swirling in just that venomous, whatever you would call it, venomous vortex of political violence. But that story is still stuck essentially where it is. I mean, sure, Joffrey might be dead and there's a new king coming, and Tywin might be dead too, but so that story has advanced, but it's also still in the exact same place for some reason. With Daenerys, however, you've actually seen her take over a city, start trying to manage it, actually have to run into the problems that a real ruler faces. It's actually, her progression as a story arc is actually pretty good. Problem is, she's still thinking like a kid, and as a kid, she's about to really get laid into. Not only with the fact that she's locked away her dragons, her power base. Not only has she destroyed her power base, but she's also partially destroyed her relationship with her dragons. I mean, it would be one thing to chain them up outside, right? Where they could at least still be in the sunlight and still essentially have freedom. No, she has imprisoned her dragons in a dungeon. Think about what that's going to do to them psychologically. They are no longer going to trust her, and they're no longer going to obey her. They are not weapons of war to just be brought out whenever you're under attack. No. These are intelligent creatures, as we've already clearly seen, with loyalties. And when you do something like that, you're severely damaging that loyalty. So that entire story is just gonna tank. You know it's gonna tank. This season has also been the season of obvious lead-ups. I mean, just with that, we've been waiting for something to go wrong with Daenerys' storyline. We've been waiting for something to desperately happen with Jon Snow at the Wall. We've been waiting for Bran, however you pronounce his name. We've been waiting for Bran to make it to the Three-Eyed Raven. And if he just made it at the beginning of the episode, at the beginning of the season, maybe we could have actually done something with that plot line. Instead, we got this meandering thing. It's amazing. It never ceases to amaze me how writers and producers have the ability to simultaneously rush through something while meandering, while just wandering through it, seeing what will happen. It never ceases to amaze me. They did that with Korra season 2, and I was harsh on it. I was very harsh on it. They did it here with Game of Thrones. The difference is they did it in such a way that it was barely noticeable. It was given the minimal amount of time required just to acknowledge that it was there. Arya's storyline, the Wall storyline, Daenerys' storyline, Bran's storyline. These are storylines that people love, right? They have their avid fans. And actually, no, I'm going to take Daenerys' storyline out of there because it did have a general arc. But really, 10 episodes and meandering that took place was not only completely unnecessary. Stannis' storyline. The meandering that took place was not only completely unnecessary, but absolutely avoidable. So let's see. You've got those four. You've got Daenerys, King's Landing, the Greyjoy Ramsay thing that was kind of there. It wasn't meandering. It just was what it was. What else is going on? His storyline really isn't there anymore. Well, I'll include it anyway. So half their storylines did not pay off in any way that was meaningful. It really is quite a downer. The difference is that these four here, in comparison to the screen time that these four got minimal screen time. You probably got maybe an hour's worth of content in the entire series. So let's see, probably 10% of everything that happened in Game of Thrones was devoted to these four, where 90% was devoted to these. So I can't have the same rage I would have at Korra for meandering the way that it did, because when Korra season 2 meandered, it meandered hard, just everywhere. When they meandered, they kept it to a minimum. So you know what? Good on them for whatever. But between the creepy, the gory, the graphic, and the meandering, it's an interesting. People always say it's hard to watch season 1 and season 2. Here's the thing: season 1 and season 2 at least had a general direction. Season 4, it really was more of a cyclical thing. I don't know if I could. I don't know if I would recommend this season. I would say it's necessary watching, but I wouldn't recommend it per se. There were some good episodes, but having good episodes and good scenes does not make an entire series good. It does not make an entire season good. Especially when Game of Thrones turns everything on its head the way it does. I mean, it's expected from Game of Thrones, but does it actually make it good? There's a difference between something being expected and something being good. And the fact that it's expected that Game of Thrones will turn things on its head, mixed in with the fact that they have good things, makes it passable. It makes it acceptable. And the fact that it's popular enough makes it culturally relevant, I suppose, is what I would say, but I wouldn't say it makes it good. I'd say it makes it, or great. I would say it makes it okay on the threshold of good. So that is my critique, I suppose, is what you would say, of the general season. The season in general was okay on the threshold of good, with a lot of good moments and good scenes inside of it. A lot of good episodes, a lot of 12 out of 12. They had 4 12 out of 12 episodes in my book. So, no wait, that's not true. They had 4 10 out of 10 episodes and 1 12 out of 12 episode. They did have some skippable episodes. They had 1 skippable episode. 2 really, if you count the first one. But I guess you really can't skip the first episode of the season, so that's a thing. But yeah, that's how overall, if you ask me to give this a number rating, out of 12, I would give it a 9.5, generous 9.5, because it was entertaining. We got what we needed to in some places. We completely glossed over 10%. We completely glossed over 10% of what happened in the season. It just randomly occurred. And just, I don't know, the rest is just, general filler. There was a lot of filler that you had to wade through. Nothing that is like the delay of Arya's storyline. It just wasn't necessary. So that's it. That's this discussion. This has been this discussion. I was glad to be able to do this with you. When Game of Thrones comes next year, I always say I'm not going to watch it, but you know what? Screw it. I'll watch it. I'll soldier on. Maybe, who knows? Maybe in the next year I might even manage to pick up the books and give them a read, and then I can join in. And then I can join in hating it with everybody else, with all the other book readers. But yeah, this has been my review. This has been my discussion, and I would like to thank you for coming here every week and watching me and putting up with me. And I will see you next time.